how do you understand your employer brand? You can aim to win awards. You can launch a new career site. You can activate beautiful campaigns. You can spend a ton of money on making everything shiny. But how do you measure how you're actually performing in the eyes of your candidates, employees, and alumni? We have developed the Employer Brand Index to help practitioners understand their company's reputation as an employer. It gives you a quantitative and qualitative understanding of what talent thinks, presented in an easily understandable score and actionable report. Learn more at employerbrandindex.co.
Hey, Sons Vaison, it's Jürgen Sundberg here with the Employer Branding Podcast, brought to you by your friendly team here at Link Humans out of London. This is, of course, the show where we have an employer brand leader on to answer questions about their company, the talent landscape, what employer brand looks like in their organization, how it's deployed, and lots of tips and tricks along the way. With that, let's start the show. Hey, Anne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Nice to talk to you.
My pleasure. So please let our listeners know who you are and what is it that you do.
My name is Ann Dotson, and I lead global employer brand and recruitment marketing for Pfizer.
Okay, amazing. So Pfizer, there's a name we've heard of. What can you tell us about the company?
I can tell you a lot of things, but to start, it's probably most helpful to kind of give you the scope of the role so you can understand kind of what the job entails. So I lead employer brand for the enterprise. I work with regional directors around the world, but we have about 90,000 employees in 90 different countries.
Wow.
So a big breadth in terms of what kinds of roles the team is recruiting for, but we aim to kind of consolidate all of the markets under one common employer brand.
And where is your HQ?
In New York City.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And what might the talent challenge be for Pfizer?
I think there's all kinds of challenges. There is the challenge of finding, kind of the ongoing war for top talent. There is the need to retain top talent at Pfizer. And then there are also particular talent segments that, are specific or have a higher need at certain points for the business. They could be anything from tech roles to oncology positions in research. It really runs the gamut. We also have, a very keen focus on early talent at the moment at Pfizer. So there's all kinds of problems. It's just a matter of kind of prioritizing them and figuring out where to start to try to tackle some of them. And I think a lot of them are shared amongst recruitment teams all over the world. So we're not unique in some of these ways.
Okay, so give us an example of what you mentioned a few roles, but what would be an actual really hard role to fill, and where in the world is it?
So this isn't a job opening at the moment, but one of the kind of key talent segments we recruit for is enterprise tech or digital roles. And those are not necessarily coding roles. They're more associate level, so somewhat entry-level roles, hired in high volume, but they're looking after all enterprise applications at Pfizer. So they are tech roles. And those are difficult to recruit for because we are competing with every other organization in the world that is looking for tech talent. At the moment. And we're also finding that, this isn't just a problem for one business unit or the digital organization within Pfizer. It's a problem that we need to start tackling across all business units. We need tech savvy individuals and talent across the business, in every business, whether it's AI or different kind of aspects of tech. We need tech savvy folks throughout the business. So I think, figuring out kind of everyone's in the same boat on this is figuring out what AI means to the talent landscape and how that's going to change the positions that we're recruiting for. And then also, the need to upskill our own colleagues.
Absolutely, yes. Which brings us nicely on to employer brand. So how did employer brand as a function come about at Pfizer? And what does the team look like? And where do you think you are now in terms of maturity?
Sure. So we started the employer brand team 3 years ago at Pfizer. Prior to having an actual team that focused on employer brand, there were people who sort of dabbled in it, but it was no one's sole focus. And I think, our leaders in people experience, which is what we call HR at Pfizer, were smart to realize that we needed a focus on this area. We've never had a problem recruiting talent. We get plenty of applications at Pfizer. We're lucky to have a good amount of brand awareness, but it's really, finding that top talent and the right talent for the organization. I think that's the key. And it's not just the top talent, it's the top talent who fits at Pfizer, who has the same kind of, who's mission oriented, um, and lives by some of the same values that Pfizer as an organization is all about. So I think that's where the rubber hits the road, and they were very smart to realize we need a team to focus on this. So I moved positions from within Pfizer 3 years ago to launch this team for the organization. And we sit within PX. So I would say we're moving along the maturity scale. We're up and running. We've got an employer brand. We've revamped the career site. We are adding to the team. So, it's been a really fun journey to get us to where we are now, but I think there's still tons of work left to be done. And we're a small team as it is. So there's also that.
There's always more to be done. Employer brand never sleeps. So how big is the team, if I may ask?
So we have 3 full-time employees, a couple people doing what we call growth gigs or kind of, temporary assignments with Pfizer to kind of learn about what the employer brand team does. And then we've got, some interns beyond that. We also do have a couple of agencies that we work with outside of Pfizer. So we don't do a lot of the creative in-house yet. A lot of that work is outsourced to some really great vendor partners that we work with.
Great. And you mentioned you sit in PX, people experience, yes. I take it. Now, is that part of TA or is that part of HR?
So it's part of TA. It is the TA organization. So we call TA candidate experience, and that is within PX. So I sit on the candidate experience team within the PX organization at Pfizer.
Okay. So you're in TA. Do you ever... When you deal with employer brand, do you ever come up against brand or consumer brand, corporate brand, and do you play nicely together?
We definitely do. I hope we do, at least from my perspective, we do. But we work, at Pfizer, it's called the Chief Marketing Office. So we do work with the Chief Marketing Office. Obviously, we're a component of the overall brand. So we want to make sure everything we're doing is aligned with where they see, the brand moving and going. But I think, it's a give and take. I think sometimes because we're a smaller and nimble team, we can also do things quickly or kind of on a lower budget that we can kind of test and then they can learn from. There were a couple examples of things we did on the careers page, which then sort of became templates for the broader Pfizer site. So it's kind of, it's cool to see PX or HR kind of lead the way in some of those initiatives. Not always, but there's been a few examples where that has happened. But we do definitely work with the Chief Marketing Office. I would say it's a dotted line since we report up through PX, but we definitely are in sync with them.
Nice. Yeah, and I've heard it many times from people on this podcast saying, in terms of content, the human-centric content, it always seems to do best on corporate channels, where it's, I guess, competing with investor relations and products and so on. So, employer brand leads the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, what is your positioning? Is there an EVP in place? And what does that look like? And how do you, where does it fit on your corporate real estate?
Sure. So the one thing we started doing pretty much immediately when we launched this team was to get into some of the research to help inform how we position the brand, how we activate the brand. So we spent about 6 months doing that. We moved very, very quickly because there was a huge need to get it done, to revamp the career site. So, we did spend 6 months doing focus groups and surveys and internal surveys, all kinds of discussions. And where we landed is use your power for purpose. And there was a lot of thought behind that and data to support it. But essentially, that is the kind of driver that people come to Pfizer with, whether you're in the digital organization, you're working in a lab, you're working in marketing, or you're in the medical field. This is the one kind of tie that binds everyone together, is the kind of unification behind this sole purpose, which is breakthroughs that change patients' lives. So the use your power for purpose is intended to unite everyone behind the purpose for the company. Although your personal, purpose will vary obviously from role to role. So it was something that we felt embodied kind of the organization's values, and was something that ties all of us together to that overarching purpose.
And are there any elements to this EVP, this positioning, that seems to resonate really well with certain types of candidates or employees?
I would say it's resonating. It's resonating really well. We've been really happy. So the main place that you'll see the EVP at Pfizer, I think sometimes the question is, where do you see the EVP show up? And I know we'll probably talk about that later. How do we activate it? But one of the major ways is the career site, obviously. So that was one of the next logical extension once we sort of solidified the brand positioning, was let's go and revamp the career site so that it reflects and activates this brand, use your power for purpose. And one of the things that's been most interesting about it is we have more than tripled the amount of visitors and the type of engagement that we're seeing on the site just through launching the brand and some accompanying materials and content to support it. So it's been really, really well received. And I think it's across the board. I think Pfizer's known for the R&D and the manufacturing. That makes a lot of sense. Being in pharma is, the discovery and manufacturing of the different pharmaceutical products. So I think, we knew it would resonate there, but what's been really interesting is to see it resonate in other areas of the business that don't seem as logical. So whether you're in, compliance or legal or digital or all these other kind of enabling functions to the core business, is that it resonates and people are proud of that connection to the mission, whether they're daily, doing lab research or not. They know that that's our purpose, and our ultimate goal is to improve the lives of patients. Obviously, I'm not in a lab every day, but it's definitely something that is a motivating factor for myself as well.
You're still experimenting with employer brand lab.
That's right.
Okay, so in terms of activation of the EVP, so you mentioned the career site. I think if you use perhaps social media and other content production places.
Yeah, I would say all the expected, channels, which would be the career site, social media, LinkedIn. One of the things that we're now kind of getting to is, I'll tell you a couple interesting things. One thing that I think has been a really cool experience over the last couple of months is we've launched a colleague ambassador network. So that's colleagues who are, would give Pfizer a high net promoter score and want to be out there in the world talking about it. We have figured out that, we don't have big budgets for media spend and things like that, but we can amplify the voice of the colleague and amplify the brand, activate the employer brand through doing things like that are not high dollar spend, but are, in line with what we want the brand to showcase. And we want colleagues to be the ones sharing that message. So that's just one thing we've done. We've done also some things that are more outside of the box, not your typical activations. One of those is we did a partnership with the Drone Racing League that we launched last year. And that has been great because what that has done is put us in front of a whole new batch of potential colleagues that we would never reach. These are not, these are digital natives. They're typically a few years out of school and, in those more entry-level roles. And so targeting young tech talent and just building the brand, that was a really fun thing to do. We actually built a 3D race course that drones could, that we could simulate drones flying through, and it was a whole competition. So that was a really fun and kind of different approach to activating the brand. So we tried to do all the normal things, check all the boxes, but then also think about what are some fun and unexpected ways we can bring the brand to life.
Lovely. Great. And just curious, but you mentioned about purpose being a big driver and mission. So when you're recruiters or candidate experience team, when they reach out to potential candidates, do they have almost like a manual? How do we use this in conversation? How can we put forward the fact that you will be working with purpose there at Pfizer?
Yeah, so that's, it's a great question, and it's a really good point, because it's something we've just been working on in the last 6 months. Is, we've got the career site launched, the brand is out there. How do we really weave in the employer brand, into that recruitment process at Pfizer, so that it's not just a tagline or something you see on a career site, but something that is really lived out and talked about, the way that, as the recruiters are the first people that are in contact with any potential colleague. So we have spent time training the recruiters on the employer brand. We've got an employer brand handbook, and we've got a bunch of things that are going to come out in the next few months. Simple things, like some are simple. It could be as simple as a signature block for their email that links to our, EVP kind of headline video. It could be things like a banner image for LinkedIn. They run the gamut in terms of how complicated these, insertions are into their process, but we want the EVP to very much be alive and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis too.
I love that, because I think that's really the ultimate. Well, let's just say that the hands-on, the practical manifestation of employer brand is really when you have those conversations with candidates. So, yeah, it's great to hear that you've got that toolkit. Right, moving on to results. You already mentioned that you had more visitors than ever on the career side. I'm interested in understanding, so what sort of metrics do you look at, and also what are your leaders asking for? So they say, "And this function has been running for 3 years.
Yeah.
Where are we now? Where are we going?"
Yes. So we look at a lot. We are a data-driven organization.
Yeah.
HR at Pfizer is very much data-driven. I think everybody is these days. But what we're looking for, we really want to be able to demonstrate business impact. So it's time and cost to hire are the obvious two. The other one that, I think a lot of different companies, as I talk to peers, are trying to figure out is, how do we showcase the quality of applicant that, because it doesn't help us to put 10,000 more candidates into a particular job rec for consideration. Doesn't help the recruiters. They're overwhelmed. What we want to be able to show, what we're working on, is how can we show the quality of the applicants that come out of these different marketing efforts, so we can equate, the dollar and cents spent comes out to this quality of candidate. We're not quite there, but that's where we're aiming. But right now, we can see things like engagement on social media. We can see what's time on the career site. We can see how many different places they've visited before they actually apply. We can see conversion. We can look at the typical funnel and see how many are at the top of the funnel and how many actually convert into applicants based on the different channels or job boards that we work with. So it's a big dashboard in terms of all the different pieces that we're looking at. There's not kind of one, but I would say at the end of the day, we're trying to demonstrate that we are making the jobs of recruiters easier.
Yeah.
We are hiring, surfacing great candidates to the hiring managers who are ultimately making that final decision on who to hire. So those are a handful of the key metrics that we're looking at, and we're doing that constantly and it's an ongoing. Typically, you think maybe we're looking at something quarterly. We're constantly evaluating, how did this post do versus that post, and trying to tweak as we go. I would say it's, it's integrated into our day-to-day business versus just kind of these look backs, like, oh, we did, Q1 was okay. We did pretty well there. What could we have done differently? We definitely do that, but my team is trying to focus too on, like, let's learn as we go, because some of this is, we had no idea how the drone racing partnership would go. It ended up becoming sort of a viral thing and took off on its own, but it very much could have gone the other way. So what can you learn from what works, what doesn't work, and tweak as you go, I think is kind of what we feel like we need to do as a team that, is still small, is not incredibly well resourced to do some of the things we want to do.
Amazing. Okay, so you have been doing this sort of role for how long now, Anne?
I've been in this role for 3 years since we launched the team.
What were you doing before?
I was leading Another effort at Pfizer, we were revamping the whole onboarding process. So I was still in HR, although my background is marketing and communications. We were focused I was hired at the beginning of COVID to help revamp the onboarding effort at Pfizer. So that's where I came from.
Okay, so let's say 5 years in that sort of sphere. What is it that makes this function or your role so unique or so special?
I mean, I truly think I have one of the greatest jobs there can be, because I get to tell the story of being a Pfizer colleague, which is, I'm one of them. So it should be a little bit easier to do that from that perspective. But it's just a great job because you're not selling somebody a product where they're going to then go put on a pair of shoes. You're trying to communicate and see if there's a mutual fit for how somebody's going to spend the majority of their time during the week. Is at work. We spend more time at work, than we do with our family and friends. So I look at it as a very unique opportunity because we have an important job to make sure not only Pfizer gets great talent and people that, gel with the organization's goals and values, but vice versa, that it's a good fit for the candidates as well.
Fantastic. All right. So my final question is then, where can our listeners connect with yourself and where can they learn more about the employer brand of Pfizer?
You can connect with us on all the obvious places like Pfizer's career site. We have a talent community you can find a link to there. We've got all the social sites, Facebook, Instagram. We're getting up and running on TikTok. So give us a minute, but do check us out there. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn and message me anytime.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Anne.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay, folks, there we have it. Be sure to reach out to our guests with any questions or just to connect. You can find this episode and the entire back catalogue over at employerbrandingpodcast.com, along with articles summarizing what we have learned. And if you, just like many of my dear interviewees, are interested in measuring employer brand, be sure to check out the Employer Brand Index. Of course, providing unbiased employer brand insights driven by data. It's trusted by some of the greatest companies in the world, and you can find it at linkhumans.com. Or why not get in touch with me and I'll tell you all about it as well. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and catch you next time. Hey,